Today, we're going to take a closer look at this dress style watch from Citizen. It's part of their Series 8 lineup. Why 8 and not 7 3/4 or 9, you ask? Because if you take the number 8 and you lay it on its side, it becomes the infinity symbol. And Citizen says that this showcases the infinite possibilities of citizen craftsmanship and a never-ending bond between watch and wearer. Originally debuted in Japan in 2008, Citizen is relaunching the Series 8 for a global audience in 2022. This is the Citizen model number NB601081L. Now, a little bit of a caveat. I normally only review watches that are quote-unquote affordable, and for me, that is easily under $500, and normally around $100 to $250. All that said, I got this watch as a gift, and believe me, I am still pinching myself to know if this is real. Of course, I have to review it. Now currently, this is available online at the Citizen USA site for $800. Again, I cannot frickin' believe I got this as a gift, much less that it is now actually mine. Hey everyone, welcome back to Eric's Everyday Watches. As always, if you like this video, if you find it helpful, please do me a favor, hit the like button and consider subscribing. So the packaging this comes in is much larger and much nicer than anything I've ever seen from Citizen. And of course it is, they need to step it up given the price range. So this outside box measures roughly 6 by 5 by 5. And removing the top reveals this solid feeling clamshell style inner box, which feels like it's very possibly made of wood. It has some heft to it and feels like a jewelry box. Not that I would know what a jewelry box actually feels like. And opening up that, we see that on the inside we have the Citizen logo printed on the top, and down below the watch is presented on a flat black felt background. Now my only negative thought about this entire packaging is that the watch pillow fits so tightly inside, when you pull it out, it has a tendency to pull out the entire bottom part. If that sounds like an extreme nitpick, it is, but I don't have many cons about this entire watch. The case and bracelet are stainless steel. The case has this octagonal shape to it, which kind of harkens back to a 1960s or 1970s vibe to it. The diameter comes in at 40 millimeters, not including the crown guards. And the lug-to-lug distance comes in at 48 millimeters, making this a very wearable and nicely proportioned watch. Now the first links do extend past that a little bit and kind of makes the effective lug-to-lug distance more of a 52 millimeters, but still very wearable. This watch has the most mesmerizing finish I've ever seen. It has both a high polish and a brushed finish to it. The brushed areas are described as a hairline finish, but it's the way that the light still catches and reflects off it which is absolutely stunning and nothing short of spellbinding. The bracelet seems to shimmer like a disco ball, in part because the letter I links have been given this hairline finish to it, while the beveled parts have been given a high polished finish. I hope this comes across in video because I cannot communicate enough how absolutely stunning this really is. Now the top and the sides of the case are very angular, which not only gives it that vintage vibe, but also continues this play on light. The sides of the case have a high polished finish, and because of those angles, it either sometimes reflects a bright white color or almost looks black. Again, spellbinding and a little mesmerizing. The top of the case and the crown guards both have been given that hairline finish to them, and yet it's only the high polished areas on this case that are going to collect any fingerprints. Overall, the watch has a feel which I can only describe as a new, vintage-inspired, high-quality dress watch which may or may not have incorporated some magic from Merlin himself. The fits and finish on this watch goes without saying. The edges and corners of the case are simply impressive. Everything is rounded off and feels buttery smooth. The bottom of the case feels just as refined as the top. Now this is where I would normally point out some little negative thing that I've noticed about the watch during my everyday use. But honestly, I got nothing to gripe about here. Even where the end links mate up with the watch, the brushing is done in the same direction and the two appear to be flushed together. On the back of the watch, there is a screw-down case back with text that reads tin bar, water resistance, sapphire crystal, magnetic resistance, and of course, made in Japan. And inside that case, we have Citizen's 9051 caliber. That is a 24 joule, 3-hand automatic movement based on the 9 series framework. It has 42 hours of power reserve, is rated at -10 to +20 seconds per day. It beats at 28,800 beats per hour or 8 times per second. It includes Parashock technology, it does hack, and it does hand wind. It also has magnetic resistant properties. The unsigned crown at the 3 o'clock position is 7.5 millimeters in width and 3 millimeters in depth, which might seem like a bit large for this size of case, but it is snuggled nicely between the crown guards. It is a simple push-pull crown as you'd expect on a dress watch. Turning it in its all the way in position winds the watch, pulling it out to the first position adjusts the date, and pulling it out to the second position adjusts the time. The date window at the 3 o'clock position has been kept simple and is not outlined. The date is printed black on white, and in my everyday use, I never had any difficulties reading the date. Now, let's take a look at the dial. Starting with the outer area, we have a white printed minute track which is divided into smaller subsections. At the 5-minute markers, we have loomed squares. Here is one of my only gripes about this watch, is that the minute ticks could have stood out a little bit more from the other ticks. Inside of that, where we oftentimes would see concentric circles, we instead find a repeated circle of subsections, only done in a lighter color and a thinner stroke. And inside of that, we have our last repeated circle of subsections, again, done in an even lighter weight stroke. And that matches up perfectly with the end of the metallic baton indices, creating a nice series of circles around the dial by the use of thin dashed lines instead of concentric circles, which are more common. You'll also notice on the dial a step down of less than 1 millimeter with a metallic edge on it, allowing the light to reflect off of it at certain angles. This entire watch seems to be based on the idea of dazzling the user's eye by reflecting light at different points. Those indices are applied metallic indices with the top surface given a brushed polish and the side a high polished finish. At the 12 o'clock position, we have the Citizen logo applied, and down below at the 6 o'clock position, we find the words Series 8 and Automatic printed directly on the dial in a justified typography format. As mentioned, the baton indices are applied, but they are not filled with loom. The indices at the 12, 3, 6, and 9 positions have all been doubled side by side to create visual interest on the dial. There is a high amount of contrast between the sword-shaped hands and the blue dial, making for easy legibility. The loom on this dial is solely on the minute and hour hands as well as on the outer track. In my everyday experience, and by that I mean waking up at 4 a.m. to go out to the airport, I can attest that the loom did in fact last all night long. As you can see, the loom on the hands and indices are a blue color, with the indices reflecting on the high polished dial ring. All of that, of course, appears in front of the sunburst dial in a stunning navy blue color. Now, normally a sunburst dial would be the star of the show, but here, ironically, it's not. And that's because the rest of the watch, the case, and the bracelet also does this light reflecting dance, and somehow it all works together. To put it simply, it is just impressive. And topping off that dial, we have an anti-reflective sapphire crystal. Let's talk more about the metal bracelet that comes with this watch. It's 20 millimeters wide at the lugs, but flares out to 22 just outside of the lugs. It does taper back down to 20 millimeters at the clasp. And that clasp is a fold-over clasp with a hidden push button signed with the Citizen logo. The clasp is a proper milled clasp. Now, one thing about this style of clasp is that there are no micro adjustments. It does, however, include half links at the end for a slightly better fit, but in my opinion, it is still a bit of a gamble. Fortunately for me, it all worked out in the end. The bracelet does come with solid end links and overall feels like a quality bracelet with no rattles and exactly what you'd expect at this price point. So let's go over the specs for this watch. We have a sapphire crystal, Citizen's 9051 automatic movement, a diameter of 40 millimeters, not including the crown guards, a thickness coming in at a very nice 10.5 millimeters, a lug width of 20 millimeters, and a lug-to-lug distance of 48 millimeters. And finally, let's go over the pros and cons. For pros, we have a sapphire crystal. It is highly legible, both the time and the date. The finish is absolutely mesmerizing. It does have a thickness of 10.5 millimeters. There's a 42-hour power reserve. It has a 100 meters of water resistance, and the loom does last all night. For cons, there are no micro adjustments on the bracelet. The crown is unsigned, and the minute ticks could be better defined. Had they put a number 8 on the crown, when you rotated it a quarter of a turn, it would have become the infinity symbol. That would have been kind of cool. So my final thoughts on this watch. Now granted, I am biased. It was a gift, and in my humble opinion, there is absolutely nothing that gives a watch more value than having some emotional tie-in. Whether you simply just like a particular watch, or maybe it was your father's watch, or maybe it was a gift by someone important to you. All that said, I can only find a few cons with this watch. Thank you for watching the video and indulging me in what is admittedly a somewhat biased review. This watch was a gift, and I would cherish this always. This has been Eric from Eric's Everyday Watches, reminding you to buy the watch that you love and don't pay any attention to what anybody else says or thinks. This is your watch collection. If you like this video, if you find it helpful in any way, please do me a favor, hit the like button and consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next video.